Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. History begins again today as we're going to be moving forward on the impeachment. Clearly, this has to happen. And, I've had a bunch of people, kind of give me the, isn't it time to move on? Oh, you guys wanted, Trump gone and now he's gone. And in fact, when we do our bi-weekly Q&A over on ThinkSpot, that was one of the questions that popped up. Isn't it time to, worry about the future? And the answer is kind of, but there's this moment where, and I keep coming back to this, and this was my original thought, that no matter who you are, if you've done something wrong, you must be held accountable. When I was a kid, there was a TV show, called Beretta. Don't do the crime if you can't do the time. This is that moment. And for too long, the wealth class of this country has gotten away with whatever they want. And Donald Trump himself said, I could literally stand on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and not lose a vote. So for me, this is about doing those things that conservatives have been telling me for years. And that's, we need accountability, Rick. We need to hold people responsible. They send around I'm sure everyone's seen it, this draft constitutional amendment that says every elected official must live by the laws that they pass. So for me, what we're going through over the next couple of weeks is a no-brainer. And it seems like something that conservatives should not be against. But the fact that it is a no-brainer kind of makes me go, at the end of it, it comes down to some really simple points. Justice, fairness, accountability, responsibility, love of country. I get people go, well, those Antifa people did not try to overthrow our government. They did not engage in a coup attempt with the President of the United States. There are some nitwits and knuckleheads who did some terrible things, and they should be held accountable like anybody else. But this is well beyond that. So to make that false comparison right from the start is telling me that you're not serious about the things that people claim that they love. Accountability, responsibility, patriotism. And I know, look, we need to be doing, and I've said this too, we need to be doing so much in this moment. We need a pandemic relief package badly. We need to get vaccines in people's arms. We need to rebuild our infrastructure and our economy. We need to get kids back in school safely. We need to do so much stuff. But understand, this is the central tenet of who we are. If we cannot be looked to by the rest of the world as the beacon of democracy, as the beacon of liberty, of that shining star of peace and peaceful transition of power, then we've lost our standing. And we're going to lose much more than just some jobs and all down the line. And as I've said in the past, while these trials that are going to be coming up of all the criminals who are defecating on the floor and urinating on desks and breaking windows and doing all of those things that my conservative friends go, well, Antifa. I don't remember an Antifa person dropping drawer and dumping on the floor. I don't remember that. Not saying they didn't, just saying I don't remember it. But for me, it's about much more than just holding those criminals accountable. We have to affirm and reaffirm that there'll never be another Trump-like figure who will move us in this direction. So that the next time a politician takes the stage and wants to whip the crowd into a frenzy, that they damn well think about what they're doing. that they don't load the gun, they don't aim the gun, and then when it goes off after putting someone's finger on the trigger, go, oh, I didn't realize. Again, back to that accountability and responsibility. And the reality is Trump's defense is, well, who could have known? Who could have known what would have happened on January 6th? Who could have known? It was purely spontaneous. We now know that this was a well-planned, coordinated, well-executed exercise. This was fueled by the lies and the deception and all of the stuff that came out of Trump's mouth and all of his sycophants all down the line. And beyond that, it wasn't just them. It was the massive media infrastructure that the right has created over the last several decades and the funding that comes from our wealthiest families. This, in essence, was their power grab moment. This was a coup. It was what it was. And we have to admit that. And that's where we start. That's where I think we can have moments of unity. We go, yeah, this was horrible. This was much worse than anything that's happened in my lifetime in our political system. And we've had some stupid things happen. We've had some bad things. But this goes beyond the pale. This deserves a severe reaction, which is why a second impeachment while someone is out of office is absolutely, in my view, warranted. And this argument that, well, he can't be impeached because he's not president anymore, nonsense. But beyond just the Donald Trump part of this, there's still the Ted Cruzes, there's the Josh Hawleys, there's the new generation of Lauren Boeberts and Marjorie Taylor Greens. There's a whole slew of these people who cheered this stuff on. A whole slew of people who riled their minions. Today is 1776. We're going to go down there and we're going to show them. And then when it happens, we're, surprised. Shock of all shocks. And the thing that gets me is the more I watch these videos, the more we see information coming out, especially as these people are arrested and charged with terrorism, like the woman out in the western part of the state who, the headline reads, "Mother of 8 arrested." And then you get down into the end of the article, she's being treated like a terrorist because she is a terrorist. But as we're going through these stories, and thank goodness we are because we need it, you're seeing just how severe this was. This wasn't just a couple of broken windows. This was, 50 police officers beaten. This was 1 police officer killed. This was homemade pipe bombs at the RNC and the DNC. This was Molotov cocktails. This was all kinds of military tactical equipment strewn across our nation's capital. This was a military exercise. And as I've been saying, you go back to over the summer with all of those invasions of our capitals, all of the marches that they had on capitals in Virginia. Those were all training exercises. Those were all the casing of the joint, if you will. And here we are in this moment looking backwards. And I know the further we get away from January 6th, the easier to go, well, they're good people. Real estate agent, flower shop owner, they're good. Mother of 8, they're such good people. We could forgive them. No, you can't. These are people who went under the flag of, we're going to assassinate the Speaker of the House. We're going to hang Mike Pence. And while they may not have articulated it themselves, they were part of that movement that rushed into our Capitol. And if you read Parler and some of the right-wing stuff that I read in the lead up to January 6th, you knew this is the mindset people went to the Capitol with. The mindset is, we're going to shut this down. We're going to take it over. We're going to reclaim. We're going to stop the peaceful transfer of power. That was the mindset. This idea, we were just going to wave our signs and show our cute little flags and we bought the hat. No. That's not what they went there for. And thank goodness for the researchers who saved all of the parlor images and all of the parlor messages so that generations from now, they can look back on their grandparents and their great-great-grandparents and down the line and see their treason recorded in real time. Because this is, as I've said, a very important moment. Our capital was under attack. Our democracy was under attack. And again, I go to this, oh, but Rick, we need to move on. What about unity? I want unity. Most certainly want unity. And I think the best place where we can find unity, because I do know some conservatives and some Republicans who are going, yeah, this is too much. This is bad. You know where the unity is? We can join together, say this is wrong. We can say it's never going to happen again. And we can hold those responsible accountable. And I know, to my Republican friends, I remember a time when responsibility and accountability were the hallmarks of your party. Maybe I'm getting too old now, but I remember that. How about grabbing that back? How about salvaging what's left of the grand old party? Because we do need two vibrant political parties in this country. We need at least two parties with ideas on how to move forward and how to get the best for what we all need. But the reality is, and I agree with Congressman Jason Crow from Colorado, who said one of the greatest crimes ever perpetrated upon democracy is what happened on January 6th. And you've got, a Republican Party that can't face what they've done. This is one of those moments where time to face up, time to fess up, time to take responsibility and simply say it's not going to happen again and hold those accountable. Now, outside the impeachment, and that's going to happen for the next couple of days and probably a couple of weeks, there's a whole pattern that's going to happen. We're starting tomorrow with laying out the trial and doing all that, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, it's going to be history, and I'm still kind of hoping they're going to call witnesses. We'll see. But I also find it interesting that the Secretary of State in Georgia, this Brad Raffensperger, he announced today that they are investigating Donald Trump for his perfect phone call. Another perfect phone call. You may remember Trump called Raffensperger and others and basically told them, go find me nearly 12,000 votes. That's what I need. Go find them. So they're going to investigate this. And this is one of the Republicans that I'm talking about going, look, we can't have this. We can't have a president of the United States strong-arming states to go and find some 12,000 votes. We can't have a president of the United States who's wielding such enormous power over states to do what he wants them to do in what I'm sure is going to be another perfect phone call, kind of like the Ukrainian phone call. Perfect. And I guess it depends on which side of perfect you're on. The side that says, yeah, go find me 12,000 votes and I win and I remain in office and I usurp democracy and undo the will of, 150 million people. And yeah, we won. So that's perfect. That's not perfect. We had more than 150 million people go to the ballot box. 84 million of them voted for Joe Biden. We're in a majority win situation. Joe Biden won. And I think what has to happen is you have to have those people then who were the cheerleaders for, go to the Capitol and, rattle the rafters and all that, to come out and say, look, Donald Trump lost. It's that simple. And then as a society, maybe we get to move on. Maybe I don't have to drive by a house where someone has put an F Biden sign up on the fence. That's not the way you get to unity. That's not the way you move forward. Now, what's going to happen over the next couple of years, and this year is going to be an interesting battle on the state levels, because as the Brennan Center has pointed out, There are numerous bills now being introduced in state legislatures across the country. 165 pieces of legislation to restrict voting laws. They're going to do that through limiting, mail-in access. They're going to impose stricter voter ID requirements, slash the time that you can register, and also have much, much more aggressive purging platforms. The Kobach plan on steroids, the cross-check on steroids. And the Kobach plan to me is an interesting one because it's my view we should all be registered regardless. And I think about when I signed up when I was 18, I signed up for the Selective Service, and I don't have to keep going back every time I move, and undoing my previous one. I don't have to go back and go, I moved from over there. I'm over here now. They know where to find me. Now, when I move, I register to vote in a new place. I'll tell you, when I moved to Pennsylvania, I didn't call Ohio up and go, hey, you know what? I lived in Ohio for all these years, and I'm registered to vote there, and I've registered in a couple of places. Can you pull that? I've not done that. But I've also never gone back to Ohio and voted, which most people don't. Now, I'm not against an idea of figuring out how to limit the number of people who are on the rolls and have moved on to other places and are registered in other places. We should figure a mechanism out for that. But they come out and say, you know what, hey, we're just gonna take you off the rolls because we like to. It's kind of silly. But again, this isn't about good democracy. This is about limiting the number of people voting. So on the Republican side, you're going to see a lot of restrictive bills. Now, also on the Democratic side, you're going to see a lot that are going to open up opportunities for voting. And I think that is a great thing. I got lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, some information on the minimum wage.
Then workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day copper miners in Butte, Montana went out on strike. Mine owners announced a $1 a day wage cut when copper prices slumped in the financial markets. Swayed by the power of the Seattle General Strike then in progress, miners associated with the Industrial Workers of the World and the Metal Mine Workers Union Local 800 formed their own Soldiers, Sailors, and Workers Council. They issued a call for a general strike. For days, area trade unionists honored picket lines, left their jobs, and held meetings to debate joining a general strike. The streetcar workers shut down public transportation for 5 days. Soldiers returning from the war helped to man the picket lines. The labor paper Butte Daily Bulletin reported the post-war economy had left returning war heroes penniless and working in dangerous mines. While solidarity was unanimous among workers, their unions had yet to pass formal resolutions. Immediately, Montana's Governor Sam V. Stewart called in the 44th Infantry to crush the strike. Infantrymen bayoneted 9 strikers when they tried to stop the anti-labor Butte Daily Post from being distributed. Spirits were high by the end of the first week as official voting began. Then the streetcar men went back to work, citing no grievances with their employer. Then the engineers followed. Finally, the IBEW caved. They worried the engineers would take their jobs as they had done in the 1917 strike. The IWW and Local 800 called off the strike, fearing continuation would be fatal. Though most of the troops were soon withdrawn, one company stayed to ensure labor peace at the local water and electric works. Butte would remain under federal military occupation until the end of 1920. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looks like for now the minimum wage increase is back in the rescue package. They're talking about, as far as we know, the Democratic side of raising the minimum wage this year. I think it's up to $9.50 an hour and then getting to $15 by 2025. Now, don't get excited. This is only the House bill. Once it gets to the Senate, you'll have the moderate Democrats and the Republicans, ripping it out of there possibly. But it's a good sign that at least they're willing to fight here. They're also talking about raising the tipped minimum wage this year from a disgraceful $2.13 an hour up to $4.95, and then increase yearly until you get to the matching federal minimum wage, which again something should have been done a long time ago. Also in the bill, they're basically keeping the stimulus checks where they were. If you make $75,000 a year, you're going to get that. I guess $150,000 per couple. You'll get the $1,400. Again, we'll see what happens in the Senate. But lots to get to and lots that we need to be doing. We need this. And for me, $1.9 trillion is a good start. It tells me that Biden learned something during the Obama years. And here to share some thoughts on, what we need to be doing on this. I've asked Andres Vinelli to come talk with us. He's the Vice President of Economic Policy at the Center for American Progress. They've got a piece out right now titled Move Fast and Think Big. Andres, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick. Happy to be here.
So I love the title, Move Fast, Think Big. In fact, I guess we'll start with the question, is $1.9 trillion enough given the situation we're in?
Well, I think it's a very good start. I mean, we have this huge pandemic facing us. We have lots of people who are having trouble making ends meet with hunger, eviction, healthcare problems, and we have a lagging economy. So this package, it's really a boost on all three counts. So it's a very, very good start.
But what we're hearing, and again, very predictably so from the Republicans, is that, come on, Andres, we can't afford this, man. We've already spent enough.
Well, it's very funny, right? We have record low interest rates. We can surely afford this, right? Nobody is really disputing that this will be a big help in waging basically a frontal war on the pandemic. Nobody's disputing that. Nobody's disputing that this will provide a lot of help to people who need it. And those who say, well, gee, this is too big, they're really saying, well, it will help the economy too much. But nobody seriously can say that we cannot afford this. This is something that we can very, very easily finance in this day and age. And these are a series of investments that will pay off in the near future.
Yeah, but here's the thing that I think is good. We're actually putting money into people's hands who need it instead of going, gee, we need more tax cuts for rich people because the billionaire class needs more. And those, those working people, let them work a little harder.
Well, that might be why some people hate this, right? If you think about those checks, for instance, right? Everyone loves checks except for the folks who want to cut them. But if you think about it, the checks as represented now will basically get to everyone but the top 10% of folks who are just, frankly, people who earn very, very good money. So this is like a big tax cut for everyone except for those who are like at very top, right? And it's very, very funny to see people who just cut taxes a few years back for those people who are in the top 1 and 10%, now saying, no, we cannot afford this for the 90% of people who had a very, very rough year. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. But the other part of this, and the part that I think is most important to remember, is every dime of that money is probably going to be spent almost immediately on keeping the economy going and paying rent and people being able to keep the foundation of our economy from crumbling, which is why this is a rescue package, and it's not a recovery package in my view. This is saving us now. We've still got work to do down the road.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that it's going to cover the bare minimum for children who are just not having enough food in their plate, people who are unemployed, gig workers that need the money, state and local governments that need that money to avoid firing teachers and police officers. This is just the bare minimum that we need to make sure that we take care of our own people. And of course, all that money will be spent nearly immediately, right, by people who go out and will go and buy the food they need, to pay for the shelter they need, the basic items for essential daily life. So this is going to be spent and will help basically ease the economy into a better place. And then we'll be able to talk about more longer-term investments that are surely needed to basically get the economy on the right track.
Right. I mean, once we get past this moment, once we get the vaccines in people's arms, and once we shore up the basics of the economy, then I think we have to make massive investments in infrastructure, and that be the beginning of the recovery and the jobs plan that moves us forward. Broadband access for rural communities, move to a greener energy economy, you move into the 21st century on our transportation. There's so many opportunities, but we just have to have the will and the want to do it.
Absolutely, and we need to make sure that all those jobs that will be created in those cutting-edge projects that you mentioned are good jobs. And by that, I mean jobs that people can live on, jobs that will have a career path to them that offer benefits. And many of these jobs probably will have to be union jobs, which are good jobs. So there's a lot to be done, a lot.
Now, see, I'm someone who says every job should be a union job. I don't care what you do. You should have every CEO in this country's got a contract. They've got it written down in paper. So should every working person.
Absolutely. Unions, what they do is they make sure that there's someone fighting for the rights of workers. We have seen in the last few decades that wages have gone down, and at the same time, union memberships have gone down. At the same time, businesses have concentrated, and CEOs, of course, make a lot of dough. And these trends are not unrelated. Everything is tied together, right? We don't have enough folks taking care of each other. We want to make sure that the jobs that are created are good jobs, and many of them union jobs, as you say, right?
Yeah. Now, in looking at the movement of this package, I got some people who are saying it should have been done already. I'm of the mindset we should have been moving as fast as possible. And you're the expert here on DC. In DC terms, are they moving as fast as they could have? And do you think that they should be waiting for Republicans to come along when we know that they're not going to?
Well, they waited, for a few days. I think that some Republicans are trying to make this work, but they seem to be in the small minority here. I mean, we had a couple of senators trying with alternative plans, which are tweaks on what the administration have done, maybe cuts, put a little bit of their imprint. But I don't think that the administration is waiting for folks to make up their mind. This is a national emergency. People are in trouble out there. They need help, and we need to provide relief as soon as possible.
Yeah, no, and there are some who are framing this as, and you write in your piece about tackling the rising income inequality and wealth inequality. Does this in any way do that? I mean, I know they're trying to tack a minimum wage increase onto it, but I'm curious, do you see this as the beginning of that, or are some going to say, well, look what we did, we're done, time to move on and do something else?
I think we're seeing a commitment by the administration to tackle this issue, which is it was here, of course, before the COVID crisis, but now it's made worse by this K-shaped economy. What many of the provisions in this package are intended or will have an effect of increasing basically wages at the bottom of the economy, and this is a good thing. It will help on the inequality ledger. This will make things better, and of course, there's a lot more to be done, but this will help. And perhaps some people are a little bit nervous that will help. They say, well, gee, this means more inflation. No. It means more wage inflation, which is more money for people who are at the bottom of the scale and for middle-class Americans. This is something that is a feature, it's not a bug.
Yeah, no, you're right. But all I've heard all day today is how It's going to cost 1.4 million jobs. I mean, we're going to lose jobs over this. If you raise the minimum wage and you pay someone a dignified wage, it's going to cost them their job. They're then going to have to go out on the street corner with a tin cup.
Well, there's a lot of debate about that among economists. So the CBO came out with estimates along those lines. What they said is, look, this is going to cut poverty by 1 million. It's going to help about 22 million people have higher wages and incomes, and this will, over time, decrease some amount of jobs throughout the years. This is not something sudden. Other economists think that the effect will be a lot more modest. When they did this in the UK, it was a successful experience in the late 90s. People who are careful about this say that the effects will be very, very small. I think there's a lot to be gained by really elevating the minimum wage to $15 an hour. This will happen over time, but this will be something very, very helpful. What this will do, among other things, is it will boost the economy. These folks will actually spend more money, will have more secure lifestyles, and this will translate into a better economy for most people. So it's a good idea.
And I argue that there's also the social spending side of things. Less people collecting, having to go and beg for the government to give them food stamps or a housing assistance or heating assistance or school lunch stuff, because your wages will be sufficient enough that you can make a living on your own without having to subsidize low wage employers.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that is going to be a net save. I mean, we have estimates that this is going to save money for the government. And you know what, Rick? Nobody likes to be in that position, right? To be held by other people. What most people want is to have a job, one job that allows to have dignity in our lives, right? And a $15 minimum wage, it's a good step. I mean, we will not get us wholly there, but basically it will turn back the clock to the early 80s. We were there in the early 80s, accounting for inflation. I don't think that's very, very bold. I think that that's something that just makes common sense.
Yeah, well, you go back to the early '80s. I remember one of the only administrations to not raise the minimum wage. Ronald Reagan, we went his entire term without a minimum wage increase. The Republicans blocked Obama from any minimum wage increase during his term, and there was never a chance of the Trump administration moving on it. So those two periods are the only time since 1935 that we haven't had an increase in the minimum wage, and the floor rising, so that that meritocracy we grew up believing was reality was actually reality on a certain level. Now I don't know how you get by on 7.25. I have no idea.
No, I can't even think about it. This is something that needs to change fast.
I'm right there with you. So, in looking at this, because the House is moving on this legislation as we're talking, they're throwing a bunch of stuff in, and good on them for keeping the stimulus checks where they were. Good on them for putting back the minimum wage and undoing some of what the moderates were screaming about. The problem is the Senate, right? I mean, ultimately, this is going to come down to what the Senate decides and what they can get to that 50 vote margin.
Well, we have to remember that this is a very popular package. People have expressed that they want help, they want it big, they want the checks. And when you look at actual voters, take a look at Florida. In Florida, Trump won, okay, Biden didn't win. You know what else won? A $50 minimum wage won in Florida. Folks, when asked, they want this. They want the big package, and so senators that are going to try and be against it will have to go back to the citizens, and that will not be a pretty conversation. So I think that some senators will take a second look at this.
Do you really think that some Republicans will come over? Because I'm looking at this as a moment where I look at the last vote. It was party line vote. It was 5:30 in the morning, and I know everyone was a little tired from being up all night, but right. There wasn't a Republican who came over to support it.
Well, who knows? I'm hoping that there will be a couple.
No, I
I'm
mean
hoping.
that is the hope. I don't think you're ever going to get to 60. So where my
Right.
point is eventually this is going to have to move the way everyone anticipated it was going to move through the budget reconciliation process, and it's gonna have to go the way it is. And for me, then the messaging comes around to, look at who didn't support, helping us in our hour of need.
Right. And I think people will remember that. Some people will remember that. It's something that is clearly needed. People have been very vocal about it, and I think that it's very risky for them. I mean, most of them will still vote the party line because that's where the party is in many ways. But I think that some people might reconsider that. But yeah, probably we're going to end up with budget reconciliation, which is majority rule, and maybe that's the way that we should decide all things moving forward.
So let me ask you that, since you brought that up, are we in favor of doing away with the filibuster?
I'm not an expert on that, but I'm personally in favor of that, yes.
Yeah, at the end of the day, do you believe in democracy or don't you? Not super democracy, the majority rule, or not. For me, it's one of those things where you live by the sword, die by the sword, because I'm cognizant of the fact that Republicans will one day, regain the Senate and probably the White House at some point in my lifetime. I'm just hoping it isn't anytime soon. So last question I've got for you, because one of the big parts of what this package does is get aid to the states and local governments, which outside of the $1,400 checks and getting the folks that support, I think is the bigger part of all of this, making sure that our local governments are still able to do the work that they do without having massive budget shortfalls, because they can't take on debt like the federal government can.
Absolutely, and you said it first, Rick. We should have learned from what happened after the Great Recession. We, for many reasons, didn't go big. We did something that was smaller, and then we got stuck with state and local governments raising taxes over 5 years, firing teachers and other public servants, and they were a drag on the economy for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that doesn't happen again. We need to learn from our mistakes in the past.
We need to learn from our mistakes. And as your thing says, move fast and think big. That's the name of the article written by Andres Vinelli. We'll make sure that we get that out so folks can take a look at it. Andres, I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Good stuff. Good talking with you. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1974. That was the day that a 3-man American astronaut crew returned to Earth from an 84-day mission at the Skylab. They were the first crew to spend so long in low Earth orbit up until that time. The crew also returned with a different kind of first. They had launched the first space strike in history. The all-rookie crew was scheduled for an arduous work schedule at the space station. When one member fell ill, they began to fall behind schedule on their long list of tasks. From the ground, NASA Mission Control urged them to catch up by working through meals and scheduled rest times. Tensions mounted as the 3 men were monitored at every moment. The commander of the trip tried to explain the crew's exhaustion, saying, "On the ground, I don't think we would be expected to work 16 hours a day for 85 days. And so I really don't see why we should even try to do it up here." 6 weeks into the trip, the Skylab 4 crew had had enough. They turned off the communication radio connecting them to Earth. They took an unscheduled day off. When the communication link came back on, the commander issued the group's demands, saying, "We need more time to rest. We need a schedule that's not so packed. We don't want to exercise after a meal. We need to get things under control." NASA agreed to stop pushing so hard. The first space strike was over, and the mission went forward on better terms.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I came across a New Republic article that caught my attention. And it's because, as I'm reading through it, I'm going, finally, someone gets the fact that all of these Q people, all these Q kooks aren't a bunch of knuckle draggers who can barely read. These are people who, well, they're dangerously educated. And I've been saying for years, it's not that it's not that they're misinformed. It's not that they don't know something. It's they're overly misinformed. You talk to any Fox News viewer, and there is so much that they know. To steal a Reagan frame, that isn't so. I'm here to share some thoughts on, well, how do Democrats deal with the coming months and years of the Q phenomenon? And is it possible to reach those folks? That's why I've asked our good friend Jeff Hauser to come talk with us. Jeff is the executive director of the Revolving Door Project there at the Center for Economic Policy and Research. Their website, therevolvingdoorproject.org. Jeff, thanks for taking time for us.
Anytime, Rick.
So we saw this frame a lot about the Q people. They're like caricatures of actual people, of which Marjorie Taylor Greene is kind of at the front of it. And I actually said the other day that we can learn from her craziness because she is someone who I guess went to college, probably has a college degree, someone who ran a business and did fairly well and is still as crazy as a loon.
Absolutely. I mean, you don't fly to Washington, D.C. in order to undertake a coup if you're really struggling. You don't run for Congress typically and get anywhere if you don't have a college degree. Now, we can ask a lot of questions about why that is and what's going on in our society that so many people have to work multiple jobs if they don't have a college degree and they're too busy providing for themselves and potentially their family to get involved in politics. But there is a connection, not a definite one, but definitely a connection between the amount of free time you have to spend doing politics and your likelihood to have a college degree. And QAnon, it takes a lot of time to stay involved in such a crazy, complex, ever morphing conspiracy theory. And that's just not something that you're going to be able to do if you're like really struggling economically. You're going to have more real issues to deal with. You don't have the luxury of playing internet detective.
Right. And this is one of those things where even at the beginning, I was saying the frame of the disgruntled Trump voter is that one of, deindustrialization, the factories moved out, their lives haven't been as good as they were expecting because the jobs are much worse. And I've always made it an economic thing. A lot of the rise of the Tea Party and those folks are people who are economically struggling. Q is something a little bit different, in my view, and you can agree or disagree. These are people, as you've said, who they've got a lot of time on their hands. And I think in Marjorie Taylor Greene's speech, she went on saying, hey, I was looking for stuff and I went to the internet. But, she found all of this stuff. And look, we're all against child sex trafficking. But that's not the basis of our entire global system and the entire government of our country, as she would have you believe.
Yeah, I think Q grew up in two different movements. The original Q was essentially, I think, a storyline for active Trump supporters looking to deal with the cognitive dissonance of the fact that the man they worship, Donald Trump, has been credibly accused of rape by a whole bunch of women and sexual assault by even more. And that is a tough thing to deal with. And so there's just projection. And so QAnon was a significant conspiracy theory and at times a dangerous one up until late winter of 2020. And, Pizzagate and Comet Pizza in Washington, D.C. being targeted. It was a thing, but it was not massive. When it really grew was during the beginning of the pandemic. And people who understand internet and social algorithms better than me have demonstrated that the way Facebook suggests content to people, basically the anti-vaccine movement and the anti-masker, COVID-19 crazies, they all kind of got squished together and suggested and pushed into the same places by Facebook's algorithms in March and April. And a lot of people had a lot of free time in March and April. All of a sudden, their recreational life, was basically destroyed. Many people were out of work. There was just a lot of free time on their hands. And that is what took Q to another level. And then if you were living in a bubble and thought that there was no way Donald Trump could lose, I mean, a bubble in which you didn't look at public polling, then the fact that Trump lost made Q and stop the steal sort of style conspiracy theories, again, a natural tandem. And so I think these social media algorithms, they see that there's a connection between the type of people susceptible to one sort of high misinformation type of conspiracy theory, they're going to be open to others. And so there's just a lot of similarity between all of these right-wing conspiracy theories.
No, and the one thing that I give Q credit for is their productions are high quality productions, and there's a seed like any conspiracy, there's a seed of truth that they just explode into mass conspiracies. And that's what all of the productions and all of the things that I've seen are incredibly well done and take that kernel of truth and just take it into some really dangerous places.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, there's a tremendous book called Reaganland by historian Rick Perlstein. It's his fourth book where he basically traces the right wing from the late 1950s, early 1960s, when it was at its nadir, it was at its low point, and then how it rose up to the ascendancy of Ronald Reagan to the presidency. And there were crazes, sort of Salem witch hunt kind of crazes about sex crimes against children in the 1970s. There's always been a desire. And of course, there really is sex crimes. I mean, like Jeffrey Epstein is in the news, and he deserves to be in the news. The man is a friend of powerful people of all political parties and persuasions, and it's repulsive and it's worrisome, and there are subsequent investigations that ought to occur. But that doesn't mean the entire Democratic Party is Jeffrey Epstein. It isn't. And so, but the fact is, there's enough evidence out there to cause people to be susceptible to the high quality production values that you're describing.
So is there a way to bring them back? I mean, I watched an interesting interview with Anderson Cooper. I generally don't watch a lot of CNN, but I saw this interview with Anderson Cooper and a Q guy who admitted that he believed something like Anderson Cooper drank, baby's blood or some bizarre way out, ate babies or something. I don't know. But the guy was like, I can't believe I believed this, but yeah, I believe that you were doing all these horrible things. Is that kind of epiphany? Is that kind of, self-introspective possible, do you think, for us here in this country, for the mass of people?
So I'm not an expert, but people like Will Sommer of the Daily Beast and Ben Collins at NBC and some other people I follow who study this pretty closely, Kevin Roos at the New York Times, I think on a one-on-one level, showing empathy, listening to people, and there is ways to bring people back from this and other conspiracy theories. There are demonstrated pathways that make it more likely. They're not a guarantee, but yes, it can be done. But I think that is not really the role of the Democratic Party. I don't think the mechanisms by which a political party can communicate are well suited to the personal interventions that are probably going to be required, which is why I think that the job of the Democratic Party is probably, QAnon, it is not disproportionately non-college educated. I mean, it's more college educated than not, but it's not that many people. I mean, it's enough people to be super frightening because there's tendencies towards violence. But I think that when Democrats are looking to secure voters, it's the people they can reach are people who are not that sympathetic to QAnon, are not, but are also, they're like a little bit of everything, but they're moderate most likely. Right. And they have like a couple of issues where they already know that the Democratic position makes more sense, and you try to work and build off of them and show why those issues matter, and why, if you think the Democrats are maybe a little bit better on fighting Wall Street, make that issue important to voters by doing something big in that area.
No, I absolutely agree with that. But the reason I ask it is, and I understand, look, from basic organizing speak, you're never going to get the fives. So you leave the fives, you leave them alone. It's if you can move the fours over to be threes and threes to be twos, that's your work. The fives they're down the road. But for me, the reason I ask this is because I'm hoping that these trials that are going to come up of all these criminals who destroyed our Capitol and defecated on the floor and urinated on desks and did horrible things that I don't know if you sat down with them right now and said, can you believe you did that? Would say, no, I can't believe I did that. Now, I'm not holding any sympathy for them. But what I'm saying is I think by putting them on display, maybe there can be an opportunity of people going, yeah, maybe they went a little too far. Maybe we need to pull back to some bit toward the sane line. Or am I being too optimistic?
I think that can be done, but I think it can't really be led by political leaders. I think that can be done in neighborhoods or like real neighborhoods or virtual social media sort of neighborhoods where people have some connection and they can share this and convey, you're not like this kind of person. I know you, and you're not like the type of people who stormed the Capitol and did all those terrible things to our nation's legislature. Like, I think you can pull people back, but it's not going to happen from a Joe Biden speech.
No, I agree with you. And this is why I'm saying once they go on trial, because the trials aren't Democrats or Republicans or any of that. You're in the court of law. Some of these people are going to go to jail for a very long time. And, it's interesting to hear some of their stories now of, oh, well, I was only doing what the president told me to do. I thought he wanted me to do it. And all down the line of people who are now kind of stepping back from, it's a revolution.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. And I definitely think that there are like union organizing or campaign organizing sort of lessons to be learned, because obviously indoctrination in values is the type of thing that employers do if they're, right now in Alabama in the Amazon union organizing, when there are locked door meetings that employers have to go to, they are going to get indoctrinated, and they're probably going to be similar production value sort of videos and other mechanisms to try to make the union organizers appear like others and to try to create sympathy and empathy with the bosses. So I think people who have to fight against that sort of asymmetric warfare and as the underdogs in union organizing and other forms of organizing might have something to say about this.
Yeah, but I got to be honest, since you brought that up, if I'm working for an employer who's spending all of this money on these slick videos and on union busters to come in and all of this stuff that's going on at Amazon, the constant harassment, the posters at every urinal, all the insanity that's going on there, that would push me to saying, look, they're spending a lot of time, energy, effort, money, resource to tell me no. This must be something for me, because I go back to something my grandfather always said. He said, if a rich guy is going to spend $1 to tell you don't need something, you better spend $2 to get it, because he understands return on investment. And this is that perfect scenario for that comment.
I mean, I think so. I think that what the big picture wind that we're pushing against, that hopefully we can start overcoming, is that sort of thinking has a certain degree of optimism to it. And I do worry that sometimes people feel pessimistic. They're not persuaded per se that the Amazon has their best interests at heart, but they might be persuaded, wow, Amazon's going to enormous lengths to fight this. And they're the richest company in the world. What does that mean down the line? Can we really win? Like that's sort of why momentum can beget momentum, which is also why it's important to keep discussing the labor wins that have occurred in recent years, like the teacher strikes in West Virginia that spread across the country. That's sort of we need a positive storyline to get out there and people to promote it in all their social media and other forums, so that people, when they see this, they're like, Amazon's fighting really hard and we can beat them, rather than being resigned to the fact that they're committed to union busting and the union busting might succeed.
No, that's an excellent frame. And, I usually frame it in the sense of empowerment. that as and I tell this, anytime I give speeches on this, I've never known a day on the job where I didn't feel empowered to say what was on my mind. As a truck driver for years, if I went out to the truck and the brakes were out of adjustment, there was a light out, that truck didn't move till it was fixed. I was empowered to make those decisions because I knew my union was going to back me up. And I know a lot of non-union drivers who they're told to take that truck. They got two choices: take that defective truck down the road, or you're fired. And for me, the empowerment of saying no is kind of like like a drug, if you will, because it gives you some bit of self-determination.
Yeah, and when I've read histories of the civil rights movement, they make clear that a victory anywhere in the country buoyed sentiments and spread like wildfire. You didn't require the existence of social media for ideas and tactics to go viral and to give people momentum. And I think that that's creating a consistent narrative that success is achievable is really important. It's important in like everything we do as progressives. It's why we always want to stay focused on our medium run to long run goals of, say, Medicare for all. But that doesn't mean that we ignore more modest achievements, because the more you get used to winning, the more confident you are that you can win in the future.
Absolutely. Without question, you're right. And for me, the messaging going forward is that bit of we can strive to get better. We can strive to move forward. And the empowerment part of it, to me and I love the way you framed it, that it's kind of optimistic. We've become a society that has looked at people with pensions or health care and say, hey, I don't have it, you shouldn't. Instead of like my grandparents' generation who believed, hey, if you had it, how do I get that? It is a very different frame of mind, and one that I think we should be trying to cultivate.
Yeah. Success begets success. And that's why we should be looking all across the government for successes. And we should be looking all across the country for examples to lift up. There is a lot of power out there. There's a lot of progress being made. One of the, not the most important thing about the insurrection, but one of the notable things to me is that we as a country didn't have a chance to really think about the Georgia Senate races, because they were called only a few hours before the Capitol was taken over by the lunatics. And that's a shame, because that is an amazing victory in Georgia. And I just, you couldn't talk about it the next day.
No, you're absolutely
right.
I'm
not saying it was the Capitol being taken over should dominate the conversation, but it should inspire. And I think it has. I think a lot of organizers across the country are inspired by what happened there.
It was a big victory and something we should be celebrating. But Jeff, I appreciate the thoughts and the time as always. Good stuff, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Jeff Hauser, Executive Director of the Revolving Door Project there at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Check out their website, therevolvingdoorproject.org. Quick break, right back. Stick around and listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Each and every day, labor's history continues to be written. Such is the case in North Carolina. On this day in labor history, the year was 2014, which saw a massive protest in Raleigh, North Carolina. The protest was part of the Moral Monday movement. Moral Mondays started off as and continued as a series of protests against policies enacted by the Republican legislature and governor of North Carolina. These policies included restricting voting rights, changing tax policies to benefit the wealthy, and slashing unemployment benefits. Nearly 1,000 Moral Monday protesters were arrested in 2013. On this date, Moral Monday brought at least 80,000 people into the streets of Raleigh. The protesters had 5 demands. First was to secure pro-labor, anti-poverty policies that ensured economic stability. They also demanded quality public education, access to health care and environmental justice, reformation of the criminal justice system, and safeguarding voting rights. The North Carolina AFL-CIO has been a staunch supporter of the effort. American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten made a trip to Raleigh for the protest. She said of the protest, people are searching for fairness, opportunity, justice, and real change. I believe that search can and should lead to the labor movement. Reverend William Barber II, president of the North Carolina NAACP, has been at the forefront of the Moral Monday movement. He addressed the huge crowd and declared, "You may have thought you were going to discourage us, but instead you have encouraged us. The more you push us back, the more we will fight to go forward. The more you try to oppress us, the more you will inspire us." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
The renowned Western swing band leader Bob Wills would joyously call out in mid-song, "Take it away, Leon," bringing on a crowd-pleasing instrumental solo by steel guitar maestro Leon McAuliffe. But now comes another Leon who's such an off-key, screechy Wall Street billionaire that crowds are shouting, "Go away, Leon." He is hedge fund huckster Leon Cooperman, who first gained public notoriety when he compared Barack Obama's election to Hitler's rise to power, and he later was dubbed Crybaby Cooperman after he got all teary-eyed during a TV interview in which he decried the vilification of billionaires. The sad rich man was weeping about Senator Elizabeth Warren's proposal to make the uber-rich pay a modest surtax on the excessive fortunes of money manipulators like him. For a while, Leon did go away. But this January, the whiner was back on TV, blaming stock market gyrations on manipulations by people, quote, "sitting at home getting their pandemic checks from the government." Then he plunged again into deep self-pity, deploring the likelihood that Biden will join Senator Warren's call for the rich to pay their fair share of taxes. "This fair share is a bullshit concept," he wailed. "It's just a way of attacking wealthy people." Then he appealed to the real victims of the pandemic to rally behind billionaires like him. "We make the world, quote, a substantially better place with our donations to charity," he asserted, pleading for public gratitude and exclaiming, "We all got to work together." This is Jim Hightower saying, "Together? While working class and poor people have been knocked down, cut off, and stomped on in the past year, America's 651 billionaires, including Cooperman, have collectively jacked up their wealth by $1 trillion, an average of $1.5 billion each."
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, one of the interesting stories, as I said earlier, for me is the Republican Secretary of State in Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, actually began an investigation today into the perfect phone call, another perfect phone call where, just go out and find me somewhere around 12,000 votes. I just find that a moment where we can have some unity, where as a country we can come together around, hey, you know what? It wasn't a perfect phone call. It was bribery. It was intimidation. It was all of the things that we don't want elected leaders to do. So we'll see. We'll see what Brad comes up with and the folks there in Georgia. Going to be an interesting couple of months. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. One of my favorite reporters over at Raw Story, our good friend Matthew Chapman. Matthew, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be back, Rick.
So what do you think? I'm looking at this as a potential. There's potential for the Republican Party to cleanse their soul and get rid of Trump and hold somebody accountable for what they're doing.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to note that the investigation is in very early stages right now. So basically, officials in Georgia are stressing that it is more of a fact-finding mission right now than criminal charges. However, I will say that they definitely have not ruled out criminal charges depending on what they find.
Right. Now, for me, just the mere fact that they're opening an investigation is an enormous leap, because nobody else is doing it.
Yeah, and, it's not every day that you see a president of the United States get investigated for this kind of thing. Because, it's not often that you see a president call up a Secretary of State and demand that he find extra votes.
Yeah, I mean that's
and then say that it'll be bad news for them and their lawyer if they don't.
Yeah, because we're going to send Vinny down with the baseball bat. Because it does kind of reek of that mob mentality. And I think once this story is written, in maybe 20, 30 years, once we can look back, once the passion and the anger and all this stuff is kind of calmed down a bit, that this is going to be like, The Godfather. It's going to be like, President Corleone. We're going to think about this as, he was trying to be the Don.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, Rick, because, looking at the things that he said on that phone call, it sounds exactly like the sort of thing that mob bosses say. It's stuff that in context is obviously threatening. But, if you take it out of context, take the words literally, they don't there's no specific threat being made there. So which is intended to immunize them from any sort of prosecution for their words.
Yeah, you got a pretty face there. It'd be a shame if something happened to that. But I think once we look back on it, I think that's going to be part of it. Now, obviously, the coming days, it's going to be all about impeachment, of which I've said from the beginning, we can't move forward as a country until we air our dirty laundry and we go through this process. And because, look, Republicans used to believe in responsibility and accountability and that our elected leaders should follow the same laws. This just seems like something that they should be behind, since it is their rhetoric that we're talking about.
Absolutely, Rick. I mean, Nixon didn't even need to be impeached. He was out of there, and they didn't need to hold an impeachment anyway to disqualify him for public office, because there was a sense at that time that behavior would not be tolerated by the voters. Flash forward to today, and the reason why there's such urgency to convict a president already out of office and disqualify them from office is because there is a very real chance that Republicans could run this guy again. There's a number of voters for whom, now I will say in fairness, there are plenty of Trump supporters who voted for him twice and didn't actually, and didn't know that they were voting for a full frontal assault on democracy. But there are plenty who do know and now don't care. We see that in the polls, if we don't do anything, there's every chance that he could be a front runner for the next presidential election.
Yeah, that's scary. That is scary, because here's the thing. I don't think he believes he's lost. I still, in fact, you did an article today on the fact that he doesn't believe that he's lost. In fact, he's put out a letter that refers to himself, multiple times as president, and talking about the next phase of the unconstitutional impeachment trial. But I don't know that he's moved on yet. I don't know that he's figured out he's former. Maybe he still thinks come March there's going to be another inauguration for him.
Well, it's the damnedest thing. If you look closely, you'll notice that all of his, inner circle, they don't refer to him as the former president. They refer to him as the 45th president. And it's a very pointed, deliberate thing. Like, they do believe that there's a way back in for him. And, I don't know whether Trump himself believes he'll be back in March, but there's certainly conspiracy theories circling in the QAnon community that he's going to be back there, that March 4th is going to be some secret extra inauguration for him. I don't know where they come up with this stuff anymore.
Yeah, as a guest earlier said, they've got too much time on their hands and they dream up all of this stuff. But since you brought up Q, I look at this Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I'm curious your thoughts on the kicking her off of a couple of committees. I'll be, for transparency's sake, I think it was a dumb thing for the Democrats to do. I think it was a waste of time pulling her off of those committees. That's something I think the Republicans should have done, and I think the Democrats bailed the Republican Party out. But since I've laid that out, I'm curious where you find yourself.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's clear from a moral standpoint that this woman has no business writing the legislation in our country. Now, as far as a practical standpoint, it's a little less clear, but I don't immediately think it was a mistake. See, Greene certainly seems to think it was a mistake. So she one of her last lines of defense was to threaten Democrats that if you kick me off these committees, I'm just going to be spending all that time fundraising, organizing for the Republican Party. But I think that's honestly exactly what Democrats wanted her to do, because the whole point of their incessant bringing her up and stuff, the whole point of that is to make her the brand of the Republican Party. I mean, I've seen a lot of people who are, suggesting that it's a backfire on Democrats' part because all the attention on her has allowed her to fundraise a ton of money. And it is true that it has done that. But, that's only a failure if your goal here is to turn her district blue. And let's be realistic. I think there's a chance that their district could come around and replace her with another Republican, but it is among the 10 most Republican districts in the entire country.
Yeah, it's a plus 27 district. You're not turning that blue anytime soon. But here's my problem with that argument is that her district voted for her knowing all the crazy stuff she's done. In fact, I would probably argue most of them voted for her because of the crazy stuff that she's done. So for me, it's, by taking her off of these committees for the next 2 years, you lose the opportunity to go, we need more education funding because people are so over misinformed. And look, Exhibit A right here. For me, you miss that opportunity. I think it was Hakeem Jeffries was, had a moment that went viral because, he was dressing somebody down. You're going to miss those opportunities because she's going to do dumb stuff on these committees. And for me, it also shows how little Republicans think of education and labor by putting her on those.
That's entirely possible. And, I think that, although I think to some extent that cuts to a very fundamental difference in the governing philosophy of Democrats and Republicans. Republicans like, drag down bare knuckle fights on the floor of the House, and Democrats just want to get legislation passed. And you can argue at how successful the parties are at those relative goals, but I think that is a fundamental difference in philosophy.
No, and the other part of this is, the Republicans love a martyr. And what the Democrats have done is they've made Marjorie Taylor Greene the martyr. For me, and I get all the arguments, and when I've weighed them, in my view, it just seems like in this moment, we should have been focusing all of that attention on the fact that not one Republican in the Senate voted for a rescue package that's going to help families who are struggling right now, and that the Senate is the obstruction to any progress of us getting through this economic nightmare and getting the pandemic relief that we need. That should have been the core message, and should be the message we hammer every day from now until we get something done.
Oh, well, there's absolutely no question about that, Rick. I completely agree with you. There's, in 2009, Democrats accomplished an enormous number of things that did great service to the American people, but they wasted a lot of time trying to get Republicans on board. And when it became clear they weren't as quick to point out the failures of the Republican Party to do anything that would help working people. I think we have a unique chance to not make that mistake again.
No, and that's
I think a lot of elected officials, including many who were there last time, understand that. And I don't think we're going to let it slide this time.
No, and I hope not. I've been saying that I think Joe Biden learned the lessons of the Obama administration. And that when he came out with his number, 1.9 trillion is pretty bold. And I think learned the lesson of trying to out-negotiate yourself with people who are never going to come along. And that's why I'm glad to see that they're moving on the path towards budget reconciliation. Look, if we get 10 Republicans who say, yep, we're going to let this go to a cloture vote and we can go on and have a vote outside of that, great. It's what we need as a country. We desperately need something to unify us. And if giving away money to people who are struggling isn't something that can unify us, I don't know what is.
What I found fascinating about the whole budget resolution that advanced today is that it included a provision for the minimum wage increase. Now, up till now, Biden has been really trying to lower our expectations on that passing. Like his expectation, he straight up said that he doesn't expect that one to survive the negotiations. And maybe it won't in the Senate. The Byrd rule is very strict, and while Democratic leaders can override it in certain ways, that would definitely be a new sort of precedent and a new sort of tactic that hasn't been seen before. But the interesting thing to me is that House Democrats are still willing to try it. They're still kicking this matter over to Senate Democrats and saying, give it your best shot.
No, and that's important because Democrats have never played that kind of hardball. At least not in my memory. Maybe you've studied this. Maybe you find something. But me, I generally see Democrats as negotiating with themselves, starting off in negotiation, saying this is what I want, and then ending up with half of that. Instead of saying, we want something bold, we want something visionary, we want something transformational, and then maybe negotiating back to what we actually need and want. I see this as maybe that opportunity of them learning the lessons of the past.
Absolutely. And that block of Republican senators who pitched that watered down $600 billion proposal led by Susan Collins, they were clearly expecting that Democrats would do just that, because the only reason they released anything in the first place is because originally they were not going to release anything. They expected that when they said no, Democrats would just say, all right, we'll come back with something a lot smaller and see if you'll accept that. But no, they were having none of it this time. They just said, all right, if you're not going to even try, we'll get on with reconciliation. And they were like, no, wait, we'll come back to the table. Here's an actual idea. Like they figured out quickly that things are going to be a little different now.
No, and I'll tell you, I'm happy that Biden learned that lesson. I haven't really found many places where I'm disappointed with Joe Biden, but it's still early. I may, but at this moment, I'm happy that he's doing the things he's done, including, the firings at the National Labor Relations Board and at the Federal Mediation Panel. And as I understand, he's basically cleaning house of all of the Trump patronage appointment people, which, again, should have happened day one. But I understand it's a long process, but they are going, and we're getting competent people into those positions who actually believe in the missions of the jobs that they're taking.
Absolutely. I was really, really pleased to see the changes that he's making in the labor agencies. And also he's making moves to reshape the Post Office Board of Governors, which would be the first step to getting Louis DeJoy out of there.
Yeah, the fact that he's still there and he's not in the jail is a problem for me.
Yeah, well, the Postal Service unfortunately has some pretty strong tenure protections that make it impossible for a president to remove a postmaster general directly. However, the president can indirectly remove the postmaster general by making appointments to the Board of Governors, and that seems to be what Biden's doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of it, I want people who are competent, and this is where, I had a lot of conversations during the Trump years of moving away from strong union protections for workers and moving to agencies who, at will do whatever they want. Instead of having career bureaucrats doing these jobs who are competent, I never want to go back to the days of patronage. I never want to go back to the wild swings in competency that you have from one administration to another in what our government does. I believe in good governance. I believe in actually getting things done. And for me, the civil service system that we have is, for now, the best system that we have. And I think we have to keep that and strengthen it on a whole bunch of different levels.
I couldn't agree more, Rick. It was a long, hard struggle to get rid of the patronage system in the second half of the 19th century. There were a number of presidents in both parties who worked on that issue and ultimately managed to create a much better system. I mean, I think that was the Citizens United of their time.
No, absolutely, without question. And it's one of those things that I think we don't think enough about because we were in this moment. And I know a lot of people who work in government. And I've spoken to people who work in EPA and other agencies, and the number of good people who just said, you know what, I'm out of here, and left. In OSHA and MSHA and all of these different regulatory bodies, was scary. And revamping that up during a global pandemic is going to be a difficult undertaking. But I'm glad that we're getting the cancers out.
I completely agree.
So last question I've got for you, because you wrote a story today that just made me laugh. Evidently, I grew up in Cleveland, as you probably know. Stark County, Canton, where the Football Hall of Fame is just down the road, maybe 45 minutes an hour away, but always has been kind of off the beaten path. The county has bought some Dominion voting machines, and the people are losing their minds. Tell me it's true.
It certainly is. So the officials in Stark County, I mean, there's a lot of Republicans there, as you can imagine. It's not exactly a place that's friendly for Democrats, but they understand that these machines are a great deal and that they work really well. And that the conspiracy theories about the flipping votes are completely baseless. I mean, in fact, if you look at pretty much all the places in swing states where Dominion voting machines were used, I mean, they almost all back Trump anyway. So this idea that has been circulating in these fever swamps of the right, that there's some sort of secret foreign plot by Dominion to take to rig elections, it's just utter nonsense. And that's why there are lawsuits against all these officials. They should be very worried about that.
Yeah, I saw this and I said, Exhibit A, Your Honor. Look at what Rudy Giuliani and the Trump clown car has done to this brand. You've got angry Fox News voters who are beyond themselves that their county actually bought these machines. This is, I think, all you need to go, this is why these companies have been so badly harmed.
Absolutely.
Going to be interesting as all this plays out, especially when these lawsuits come and are front and center. But Matthew, I appreciate the time. Great work you do over there at Raw Story. I hope people will check it out, rawstory.com. We'll get links out on how you can do that. But thanks so much. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much, Rick. And I just want to give a shout out to my wife who's listening to me 2 time zones over. I love you, babester. We'll see each other soon.
There you go. Good stuff, Matthew. Appreciate the time. But here again, like I said, the reality, Exhibit A. I can't wait to see Rudy. Defend himself. I think that's going to be fun. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day copper miners in Butte, Montana went out on strike. Mine owners announced a $1 a day wage cut when copper prices slumped in the financial markets. Swayed by the power of the Seattle General Strike then in progress, miners associated with the Industrial Workers of the World and the Metal Mine Workers Union Local 800 formed their own Soldiers, Sailors, and Workers Council. They issued a call for a general strike. For days, area trade unionists honored picket lines, left their jobs, and held meetings to debate joining a general strike. The streetcar workers shut down public transportation for 5 days. Soldiers returning from the war helped to man the picket lines. The labor paper Butte Daily Bulletin reported the post-war economy had left returning war heroes penniless and working in dangerous mines. While solidarity was unanimous among workers, their unions had yet to pass formal resolutions. Immediately, Montana's Governor Sam V. Stewart called in the 44th Infantry to crush the strike. Infantrymen bayoneted 9 strikers when they tried to stop the anti-labor Butte Daily Post from being distributed. Spirits were high by the end of the first week as official voting began. Then the streetcar men went back to work, citing no grievances with their employer. Then the engineers followed. Finally, the IBEW caved. They worried the engineers would take their jobs as they had done in the 1917 strike. The IWW and Local 800 called off the strike, fearing continuation would be fatal. Though most of the troops were soon withdrawn, one company stayed to ensure labor peace at the local water and electric works. Butte would remain under federal military occupation until the end of 1920. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm really interested to see what the Rudy Giuliani defense is. As Dominion voting is going to go. Look, this is what we're going to face, and it's this is just one story from one place in Ohio. Now imagine all of these states that that are buying new machines. Imagine how badly that brand has been screwed over. And I think it's kind of funny on a certain level, because look, the left, they've had their concerns about voting machines, too. I mean, there was always the black box voting people, who questioned, as I did for years, the fact that there wasn't a paper trail. We need to have that kind of that trail, and it's gotta be and this is where there's an opportunity for unity. This is where there's a chance for us to come together, because everybody has concerns about our voting system. And I know everyone's saying that this was the most secure vote ever, and it was. There were so many eyes on this. I don't know that you could have cheated, even if you'd have tried without getting caught. Did they catch some irregularities? Did they make up a bunch of them? More likely so. But this is one of those moments where there's a great opportunity to have a push to move in a better direction. And look, as I said, at the beginning, according to the Brennan Center, they say that in 33 states across the country, there are right now 165 pieces of legislation that have been introduced, pre-filed, or carried over from the last year, that are going to restrict voting access. 165. But on the other side of them, in 37 states, there are 541 bills to expand people's ability to vote, to do mail-in voting, to do early voting, on voter registration, on voting rights restoration, on people being able, once you've done your time for whatever crime you did, you get your vote back. So maybe when Rudy's convicted or Trump's convicted, well down the road, they can earn their right to vote back by doing their time. I think it comes back to this opportunity of fairness and this opportunity of justice and the things that we like to believe. When we're thumping our chest and waving our flag and wagging our finger, those things that we like to believe that we stand for: liberty and justice, freedom for all, a more perfect union. Yeah, there's an opportunity. And part of it can be around voting. Part of it can be saying, look, that every person has the right to vote and that vote is counted. And to say, yes, we want accountability. We want to make sure that the votes actually match the machines, which is why we need a hard, fast paper trail. I've been saying for the longest time, the voting machine should be where the votes are counted. But that piece of paper is your vote, and that can be counted over and over and over again. To me, that's what's important. So we can have a lot of these conversations, and I think they would be constructive and helpful, as long as we start from a place of every American has the right to vote, and that we tear down barriers. I'm of the mindset we should have early voting, and I said during the election, I loved the fact that I was able to vote by mail. I requested a ballot. Within a couple of days, it showed up. They sent me an email saying, "Hey, we sent it. Did you get it?" I got it. I filled it out. I dropped it off at the election office in the little box, guarded by a sheriff's deputy with a mask on. And next day, I got an email saying, "Hey, we got it. All's good." And then down the road, when it was counted, hey, it's been counted. It was actually a pretty great system, something we should be expanding. And you know what they've got? They've got a piece of paper with my vote on it, with my little X right there. Yes, that's what we should be moving for. Just my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be back to share some thoughts on the impeachment and on what we can expect over the next couple of days. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
So as the Biden administration prepares a whole-of-government approach to combating climate change, The Democratic majority will pursue a whole-of-Senate approach as well.
Democrats take control, pledge to act on climate. Automakers drop bid to block California's vehicle emission standards. Coal will be gone from the U.S. power grid by 2033, says new report. Plus, COVID lockdowns cleared the air, but also increased global warming.
What? All of those confusing stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Democrats are also in the position to do something about climate change. That's right, we're coming to take your straws.
That's right. Suck it up. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, good news because COVID cleared the air, but made global warming worse? What?
Yes, COVID lockdowns in 2020 led to temporarily cleaner air around the world.
It was beautiful.
It was. And now a new study shows that it also led to a slight uptick in global warming.
Why?
The drastic drop in fossil fuel use also caused a drop in toxic particulate air pollution. Those are teensy particles that are spewed from tailpipes, coal plants, and industry that helps create that brown haze over cities. Those particles also cool the atmosphere slightly by blocking the sun's heat. So yes, cleaning up the air will warm the planet a tiny bit, but it will kill a lot fewer people from toxic air pollution.
So pollution is needed to stop global warming.
No, pollution is not needed to stop global warming. Only stopping the use of fossil fuels will stop global warming.
I told you I was confused.
Big moves underway in the auto industry in the wake of General Motors' announcement last week that it will phase out production of conventional gas and diesel vehicles and shift to all electric by 2035. Toyota, Fiat Chrysler, and several other automakers announced this week that they will drop their legal effort to block California from setting more stringent fuel economy and vehicle tailpipe emission standards. That's a special authority granted to the state under the Clean Air Act that the Trump administration attempted to revoke.
So they were playing along with the Trump administration just to suck up to the Trump administration?
Yep. Ford, Honda, BMW, Volkswagen, and Volvo had already committed to abide by California's tougher standards. The new move signals that the auto industry may finally be ready to work with President Biden's effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that cause dangerous man-made climate change. The Trump administration in March finalized a rollback of Obama-era fuel economy standards, which the Biden administration says it is moving swiftly to rewrite.
Got it. So now they're sucking up to Biden.
In politics, Senate Republicans finally agreed to a power-sharing arrangement that formally hands over control of Senate committees to Democrats, who have a one-vote majority with Vice President Kamala Harris. On the Senate floor on Wednesday, Democratic Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said he has directed incoming Democratic committee chairs to put climate change at the top of their agendas.
I promise that any action we take on infrastructure in particular will prioritize green infrastructure and the creation of green jobs and create many jobs, good-paying jobs, we will.
Good-paying jobs, we will? Is he Yoda?
This Democratic majority will compel the Senate to urgently address climate change, beginning with work in all of the relevant committees.
The U.S. Senate also approved former Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg as Secretary of Transportation, making him the first millennial and first openly gay person confirmed to a cabinet post. But most importantly, Buttigieg will be the first transportation secretary to openly accept climate science and advocate for the necessity of building climate-resilient infrastructure. And that matters because new research shows that man-made climate change is causing sea level rise to accelerate, with oceans rising faster than scientists' most pessimistic forecasts. Revised estimates published this week in the journal Ocean Science show coastal economies around the world have even less time to prepare for increased flood risks than previously thought, even as many are already struggling to adapt to more frequent floods, storms, and tidal surges. The researchers warn that trillions of dollars worth of insured property now faces accelerating flood risks and suggests countries need to move even faster to cut their greenhouse gas emissions. Finally, good news for things that breathe.
That's me.
Polluting coal is on track to disappear from the U.S. power grid by 2033 as the global shift to renewable energy accelerates. That's according to a new report from Morgan Stanley. Coal supplies about 20% of U.S. electricity currently. The report projects that coal will be replaced largely by renewable energy sources that will supply 40% of U.S. electricity by 2030 and more than 50% by 2035.
See you, Cole. For much more on all of those reports and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the terrible news of Texas Representative Ron Wright dying on Sunday. He was hospitalized with COVID-19. And what's frustrating to me is, I see people, it wasn't the virus. No, he had all kinds of other problems, and maybe he did. I from the reports is, he was being treated for lung cancer and other things. But what finished him off was the virus. And this is one of those things where, can't we agree that this is bad and maybe we should be moving forward and doing things instead of fighting over, well, it wasn't really what killed him. Does it matter? He's still gone. Sad. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on where we are, and hopefully we get some of this stuff under control. I've asked our good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman and one of my favorite political analysts, to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So, am I the only one who's kind of frustrated by this? I mean, they did the same thing with Herman Cain. The guy's in the hospital because he had coronavirus. He had the COVID. He passes away, and immediately, no, that's not what got him. There's this fight over, who counts and who doesn't. I guess I'm just a little frustrated by it.
I hear it a lot about the number count. Well, that's not what it did, or they had a automobile accident and they died of COVID. I really don't know of a case, where that actually happened, but you hear it.
Yeah, I've heard all of those anecdotal stories.
I've heard them.
So, did you know Representative Wright?
No, did not know him.
Okay, well, he was 67, and
right.
Sad to see him go.
Right.
Even though he was on the other side, it's a horrible thing. But here's my thing. We're still not getting this moving fast enough in my view. Some of the stories that we're hearing about long lines for the vaccine, people, not being able to navigate the system, lots of problems. Where do you think things are going right now?
Well, on a personal level, I had spent about 24 hours, and by luck, my daughter got me my first shot lined up this week. I surfed seriously about every Kroger in the state of Ohio to try to get a shot, and it's just getting more difficult. I got my father lined up for a shot. He's 97, and that was over a week ago. But it's really becoming difficult now here in Ohio. For some reason, they just threw the teachers into the mix. I think it was today. Why they weren't there before, I don't know. I think another frustrating thing in Ohio, Rick, and statistically, this is kind of running close across the nation. A lot of the workers in the nursing homes, 60% in Ohio, refuse to take the shot, itself. And I was thinking, wow, if they had taken a shot too, it'd be interesting. We'd have even longer lines. But the distribution in some states is running a little bit better, but it just needs to kick in gear.
Yeah,
needs to kick in gear.
No, and this is where having the story of the NFL opening up their stadiums and hopefully we get and Biden using the Defense Production Act, maybe we ramp up production and we start getting needles into people's arms. And as I've been saying, we should have been using the military to do this, as Trump had said over the summer. That they were going to do, because hey, if you can hold a bayonet, you can hold a needle.
Right.
You're still jabbing somebody with it, just a little bit different. And look, I was a 10-year-old giving my great-grandmother insulin shots. Not a lot different. If I can do it at 10 years old, anyone can. We need to be moving quickly. And my thought is that on the nursing home workers, there's part of me that goes, "You're good, you fine, you move on without them. The employers will figure this out." And I got to be honest, I think a lot of employers are going to have a position of, well, if you don't get it, I can't have you here. Or you're going to have to wear, certain protection, and there's going to be some things that are going to make it a little cumbersome for them. But also, this is because of the anti-vax movement, who thanks to Facebook has been like literally everywhere.
I mean, I still hear it now about people, afraid to get it. I heard a conversation tonight, about that, with 3 or 4 people. The other thing is they could. The way I'm going to get it is, and I took my father to get it. So you go and there's a small area where you can have 4 people, on chairs. Then you have to wait 15 minutes. And my thought, dovetailing back to what you said about the military, you could have gymnasiums where you could have people easily spaced, 40, 50, 60 people spaced with the military, inside the gymnasium. And you're just covering more people at one time.
Yep, every school across the country should have people lined up. This isn't hard. Look, I can figure this out. It's just a matter of getting the resources in place and then getting people to do it. We should be deploying the National Guard. Trust me, it is not hard. I learned to give a shot on an orange. They said, "This is all you do. You push the little plunger. You're done. That's simple." This isn't difficult.
Right. Yeah, so I just read about, where the president said about, utilizing the military. And I think it's a great idea. Something's got to give. It's got to go faster. And again, I'm so appreciative to be able to go to Kroger Grocery and to get one. Don't get me wrong at all. But I was, like I said, I was there with my dad, and you are in limited space.
Yeah, why the hell are we using grocery stores and Walgreens and CVS? Yeah. That makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Well, again, you're looking at, and the setup. Your listeners know the setup of a store like that. You can have maybe 4 people, 5 people, which is you have to sit 15 minutes afterwards. So you're running 4 people an hour?
Yeah, that's crazy.
30 people in an average day.
That's crazy. I mean, the schools are shut down in a lot of places. We could utilize those. You could open up churches, and a lot of pews. We can put people, 10 feet apart. We can be doing a lot of things that we're not.
Sure.
And again, for me, it comes back down to the fact that we haven't gotten this money out yet. They're still dickering over this rescue bill, and I know that they're going as fast as they can to get through the reconciliation process. But this is something that should have been agreed upon. You want unity. You want to bring the country together. Getting people well and giving them money is not controversial. It shouldn't be partisan.
Right. I actually thought there'd be something by now.
I did
thought
too.
It would go a little faster. I really did.
When you were in Congress, I mean, earmarks were a big thing. You brought things home. As a congressman, you had ribbon cutting ceremonies, and you got to say, "Hey, look what I brought back to our district." Wouldn't it be great if we had, Congress people and senators who go, "Hey, look, we brought 1 million vaccines into our district, and oh look, we secured this office. Come to this gymnasium, and I'll be the one who sticks you in the arm."
Right. Absolutely. I mean, getting the money out there is essential. And, if anything, I would think peeled off from the entire bill, you would think that if it was, $49 billion, peeled off from the entire bill, it would take about 10 minutes to pass the COVID money itself.
Yeah.
Here's $49 billion or $30 billion or whatever for the implementation of the shots. Here, we're going to pass this in the next 5 minutes.
Exactly.
And we'll still deal with the rest of the bill, but we're going to pass that portion in 5 minutes.
And this is the thing that I think people are frustrated with. I know I am. That I want to get things done. We don't have time to dicker around. We don't have time for petty political infighting. We don't have time for bruised egos. We've got families that are struggling. We got 95-year-olds who don't have a vaccine yet. That is a major problem.
Sure, my dad got his finally last week. And then the president made, I think, a very important statement yesterday, and it was, appearing in the news today, which is that it's a national emergency for schools. National emergency. To get kids back physically into schools.
Yeah, but he also said safely. And this is the part that the crazy people aren't paying attention to. We've been trying to open the schools, and I know where my kids go to school, they've been on this. You show up for 2 days. Wednesday's a day off for cleaning, and then the other half of the class goes for 2 days, and then you do everything virtually, and it's kind of a mixed hybrid thing. And they're opening it up, closing it down, opening it up, closing it down, to where week to week you don't know whether it's open or it's closed. I'm of the mindset at this moment, leave the damn thing closed. We reopen in the fall. Make sure that people are safe. Focus on getting kids the best education. And I know people are struggling. People are having a tough time. Get them the resources that are going to help them. But don't force people back into dangerous classrooms. It makes no sense to me.
Right, and he did. He said safely. And the other factor that they have to talk about and they have to come to terms with is this. You know what? The proficiency test, et cetera, because I saw a letter coming from a school yesterday that a parent showed me, which was ridiculous, where it says, we're failing on the numbers. No kidding. I think this year that's going to happen. I think this year, they're going to have to look at science-based judgment. That's what was said with the president's people. Science-based judgment about what the minimum requirements are going to be. And this year, they've got to do things safely. You're right. They've got to, get people vaccinated, the teachers, et cetera. And they've got to come to terms with the fact that, the test scores just aren't going to be where they want them to be this year.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm full disclosure, I'm an anti-test person, from way back. We've opted our kids out of all of the standardized tests because they're idiotic.
In 1994, I campaigned on the fact that I was proud that I stopped proficiency tests in Ohio for 8 years. I campaigned on that, and I did. And as soon as I left, they instituted them.
Yeah, I mean, look, as I explained to my kids when we were doing it, I'm a big fan of tests.
Sure.
Every Friday when I went to school, we had a test. On Monday morning, we got the results of the test, and you learned immediately what either you knew or you didn't know. Big fan of that. I'm not a fan of taking a test for 2 weeks in March or April and then not getting the results until next November.
Right. Well, they use them as a judgment and to take the place of curriculum, and that's where I was against them. I used to say, if you want testing to know how you're doing for your school, fine, but don't make them a competition contest from school to school and then hurt the levies. I just never bought into that whole theory of how they did it.
No, I'm right there, and again, that's my rationale as well. But here the thing is you've got this movement of parents and this movement of, I would argue, more right-wing think tanks and people who see opening the schools as something to tear us apart. And I look at this Fox News woman, this Rachel Campos Duffy, who was on one of the Fox shows, and she was basically asked this softball question by the host of, who's looking out when you come back to getting children back in the classroom. And this woman went on this whole rant about, how, Joe Biden's beholden to the teachers union and, teachers unions have way too much power. And it's those evil teachers, those bad, horrible teachers. And then she finishes up with I think is hysterical, of blaming Michelle and Barack Obama because, they could solve all this with one tweet. I don't even know where to begin with the insanity of that statement.
I didn't see that.
It's really
doesn't sound rational, but I didn't see it.
It's crazy though. But I mean, this is the thing. This is the kind of stuff that bothers me when we're talking about this, because we can't have an honest conversation of, do we think teachers should go back into an environment where they can be sick? And I think Biden hit on it when he said, look, we need to make sure that ventilation systems are up to date. We need to make sure that we've got small enough classes so he actually had a thoughtful answer. Now, I'll be honest, when I heard that, I was like, wow, a president with an actual honest answer that isn't a national embarrassment. Wow. I'm impressed.
Right.
It just is what it is. Let's move along down the road. I got a couple of questions on these variants that are popping up. There's a story, I guess, in the UK. There's a study out that the UK variant is doubling in the US every 10 days. Are we concerned about this?
Well, I mean, we are. There's some facts they don't know yet, but obviously they've got some concern. But the highly contagious variant. They first found that in the UK. It's doubling here every 10 days, and that was according to a study released on Sunday. And And now it hasn't been, peer reviewed, which is what they have to do through the process to look at it to make sure it's scientifically accurate. But they are worried about it, obviously, and about whether the shots can take care of it. In South Africa, they've actually suspended the vaccines at this point in time to see what happens with the variant. And the reprint study found that the United Kingdom variant is 35 to 46% more transmissible in the U.S. I'm not sure why, but it is more transmissible in the U.S., and that's in line with other studies that they've had. So again, we've got to continue with the vaccines we have, but obviously the scientific community is going to have to take a look at this, and it may not be more deadly, but it's more contagious is what they know at this point in time.
Well, maybe at least I know Joe Biden's not going to go. Come summertime when it gets warmer, all be fine.
Or call it a hoax.
Because it was. I guess it was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday that a year ago yesterday that Trump said, when it gets warmer, it'll all go away.
Well, I mean, we've heard so many things, and that's part of the confusion too. People hear different things and they believe different things, and now they're finding out the scientific facts of it.
Yeah. Last question I've got for you. Obviously, starting the impeachment,
right?
Which should be a couple of interesting days. What are you expecting?
Well, hopefully they're going to finish it up this week, and I say hopefully, frankly, for both sides of the aisle. They're going to kick it off. One of the president's lawyers, I think, wanted religious, he's Orthodox Jewish, and wanted Friday off. So obviously they were thinking about going at least Friday and now maybe into next week. But it's going to be kicked off tomorrow. The arguments will be twofold, of course, one or threefold by Trump's people, which will be that he did not incite anything to happen. He said go down, what they're saying, go down to the Capitol, and later on he actually said peacefully. That was, of course, afterwards. And then the second part of the argument is going to be whether he incited or not. It's going to be a free speech issue, First Amendment. The third part, of course, which is interesting and probably has some legs, if in fact he was convicted, is that it's unconstitutional as he's not a sitting president. So those are the three arguments. Of course, on the other side, the managers are going to argue about what he actually said, what happened, and they're going to start to use federal court cases that are being undertaken against the perpetrators, the people that did the riot. They're using some statements in those court cases as to why they did it, which is leading back to the president.
So no witnesses then?
Well, I don't think there's going to be witnesses. They haven't spelled out two things: the witnesses, and they have not spelled out the amount of time. But I really don't see. I'm trying to vision what witnesses they would have. I don't think we know that former President Trump is not going to be a witness. We do know that, of course.
Yeah, I was hoping he would come in and blow it all up.
It would have been interesting. We could have talked about that on your show for a few nights.
Yeah, that would have been comedy. But evidently he turned in his SAG-AFTRA card, so no more performances.
It's done.
Like you said, I hope because I think they did give Friday off, so I'm hoping by Monday we get this taken care of, because I don't see them convicting him. I don't.
No, they're not going to, and it's best. I said in the in a theoretical world, I can see Senator Schumer and Senator McConnell having a cup of coffee real quick in the privacy of a room, saying, "Do either one of us want this to go on for 3 weeks?" No, I just don't think either side does.
Yeah, it'll. We'll see what happens and where we go from here. But Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Good stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
We'll see where they go with it, but I still don't see them convicting him. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1974. That was the day that a 3-man American astronaut crew returned to Earth from an 84-day mission at the Skylab. They were the first crew to spend so long in low Earth orbit up until that time. The crew also returned with a different kind of first. They had launched the first space strike in history. The all-rookie crew was scheduled for an arduous work schedule at the space station. When one member fell ill, they began to fall behind schedule on their long list of tasks. From the ground, NASA Mission Control urged them to catch up by working through meals and scheduled rest times. Tensions mounted as the 3 men were monitored at every moment. The commander of the trip tried to explain the crew's exhaustion, saying, "On the ground, I don't think we would be expected to work 16 hours a day for 85 days. And so I really don't see why we should even try to do it up here." 6 weeks into the trip, the Skylab 4 crew had had enough. They turned off the communication radio connecting them to Earth. They took an unscheduled day off. When the communication link came back on, the commander issued the group's demands, saying, "We need more time to rest. We need a schedule that's not so packed. We don't want to exercise after a meal. We need to get things under control." NASA agreed to stop pushing so hard. The first space strike was over, and the mission went forward on better terms.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, big fun. Big fun coming in the next couple of days. And as I said, I don't foresee there being a conviction, but I think we need to have this. I think we need to have the statements. I think we need the presentation of what happened, and look, know where people fall on this. It is that simple, and this will certainly come. This will certainly come at a time when we honestly need it the most, I think. And finally, this interesting interview with Rich Trumka, the president of the AFL-CIO, on HBO, on Axios on HBO, where he calls out the Democrats over the years for having basically done nothing, and basically said, look, Clinton and Obama didn't understand the importance of labor unions. You think? I've been saying this for years now. This is not new. This is where I've believed that the Democrats and the liberals had better figure out how to, labor up, had better figure out why labor unions are important, and push and promote them, instead of using them as a piggy bank, and then the butt of a joke. During the Obama years, I voted for him over Hillary specifically because he said he was going to push forward the Employee Free Choice Act. And that's the reason a lot of labor unions got behind him. And he didn't do any of that. This is where Biden had better learn that lesson, and honestly had better move something in some way, because we're getting to the point now where union density in this country is almost where it was when it was illegal to be a union member, when you could legally be fired for joining a union. We're reliving some of the horrible past. So to see Trump could come out and say this now, understand he's gone in a year. He won't be the president in several months. But to see him come out now and say something, I think is important, but it's also a little late. This is something that we should have been pushing heavily for. And this is why I keep telling my liberal friends, you want to solve inequality, you want to solve the massive wealth inequality that we have, if you want social economic justice, you get behind people collectively bargaining and winning better wages, hours, conditions, and also the more important part, giving people a sense of empowerment, giving people the sense that they control their destiny. Important stuff. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.